Hello developers, welcome to day 22 of the 30 days of JavaScript challenge. Today presents another opportunity for us to tackle challenges and deepen our understanding of JavaScript concepts. Let's dive in and make the most out of this learning journey. Today's challenge says, write code that enhances all arrays such that you can call the array.last method on any array and it will return the last element. If there are no elements in the array, it will return -1. So that is the challenge. Then I told you may assume that the array is the output of JSON.parse. Then example 1, if you're given an array of 3 items, null, empty object, and 3, it should return 3 because 3 is the last element of this nums array. Example 2, it's an empty array, so there's no element, so it returns -1. So that is basically how we should solve this challenge. Those are the example given. Then the constraints, the array should be a valid JSON array. Then the length of that array should be between 0 and 1000. So let us learn some key concepts, then dive into the solution. The first key concept that we learn today is prototype. And a prototype is an object that other objects can inherit properties and methods from. And every object in JavaScript has this property, prototype. So let us get an object. So I'll get an object called person. And I'll give it one property. I'll say name. Then I'll give it the name John, like that. So I've created an object there. So if I log this object, so if I say something like console.log, console.log, then I log person, you can see this person it's an object and it has one property called name, and the value, its key is name and the value is John. But if you expand it, you can see it has this prototype. And if you look at what the prototype is, it appears to be an object. And this prototype, if you expand it even more, you can see it has some methods which we did not define. And you can use this method with this object. That means that we can use methods like toString, that you can see there's this toString here. If you scroll down, you can see there's this toString. Here, there's this toString. So you can use method like toString that we did not define in our object, but it will work. So for example, if I use my object, like I say person dot toString, you can see I can comfortably use that method. And if I log, you'll see it will give me object as a string. You can see this toString method worked. Although in my original object, I didn't have that method toString. In fact, I didn't have any method. But I was able to use this toString method because it is provided by this object prototype. So how does this work? So when you create an object in JavaScript, it gets an additional property called the prototype. And this property is added automatically to it. And this property acts as the link of this object to the parent. And when you create a blank object, the prototype key is always going to be a reference to the object.prototype, which is an inbuilt JavaScript object that contains properties and methods that we saw here. So the same thing happens with arrays. For example, if I have an array here, so I'll just get a simple array. I'll call it numbers, but I'll just put it as an empty array. So if you log this, you can see it, if you log these numbers, let me just log numbers. Log numbers array. I called it number. I missed the spelling. If I log this number like that, you can see it's an array. And if you expand it, you can see it has this prototype also, but it is of type array. So this array also has this prototype key. And if you expand this prototype, you can see there's some methods that you can use with this array. So you can do something like numbers.push, numbers.forEach, all these methods like map, pop. You've already seen how you can use them, but you did not define them in this array. But even if you scroll this array even further, you can see it has another prototype inside it, of which is an object. So this array, it inherits from objects. And if you expand it, this also has some properties that we saw in objects. And that is why we say that an array is an object in some case, because you can also use these methods and properties available for objects. You can use them with arrays. That's why it says arrays are just objects, because they inherit from objects, as you can see here. So now that you know about the prototype, we can comfortably solve this challenge, but let us remind ourselves about some concepts here. So if you want to create an array, you can just use this syntax like that. And here you can definitely say that since you're using this new keyword, this array will be the constructor function for creating this numbers object. So this number is an object of type array. I think that is clear. And if you want to create it, if you put one constructor here, you'll have created an array of size 4. But if you put more than one, this will be the element that will be contained in this array. So if you log this numbers array like that, we expect I see an array of 4, 4, and 5. This is something that you already know. I'm just reminding you so that you can solve this challenge with this. And you can see indeed I had an array of 4, 4, and 5. So here we are expected to create a method on the array object. And that's why we needed to know something about the prototype. So you want at the end of the day, since now you have seen that we can use something like any let's say you have an array here. Let me return the previous array that we had. Let's say I have this array of numbers. I can do something like numbers or number dot push. And I can add some letter there. Then if I log these new numbers, if I log that number array, now it will contain this extra 4 at the end. This is something that you already know. You can see it will contain this 4 extra at the end. So we're trying to create a method. This push is a method. So we're trying to create another method that when you call it with an array, it will return this last index. Currently, there's no that method. Like if you call an array.last, now if I do something like array.last, like if I call that numbers.last, there's no method that is called last. So if I call here last, it will not do anything. So if I hover, I don't think if this will do nothing. You can see this will just do nothing. In fact, it's an error because there's no this last method on this array object. So in short, this challenge wants us to create this last method on the array object. And you can do exactly that. And that is why we learned about the array object and the prototype property. So now we know that this array has a property called prototype, and in that prototype property is where all methods like this one you have used there, like this push, they are stored in this array prototype. So if you want to access push, you have to do something like array.prototype.push. There is where you can access push. So if you want to create this method called last, you'll just use the same syntax. So I'll use something like array. This is the array class, or you can call it object, but it's the array class. Then I can say array prototype, then dot last, like that. So I'm trying to add this function last in the array prototype. So I can say is equals to a function, and this is the function that I'll define. So you can just start solving this challenge. So this challenge expects us to return, if someone calls array with this dot last, it should return the last item of that array. And if that array is empty, it should return -1. And I know by now you know to use this keyword. We say this it represents the instance of that object. Like in the example that you used, you can say numbers. If you say numbers dot push, it's like this dot push. This is any array name dot that method. So I can say when this, if you want to get the last index of an array, it's always that array length -1. So if I say this, in this case, this I'm referring to that array index length. To get the length of an array, you have this inbuilt property called length. So I can say this dot length. So this I'll get there. If this one, then I put -1. This one should return the last index of that array, because you know that the length is always 1 more than the index, because index are 0 based. So if the array has 5 items, the last index will be index 4. That's why to get the last index of an array, use this length -1. The length then -1 to get the index. So this one should return the last index. So I want when someone calls this last to return this last index. But there's this condition saying that if the array is empty, return -1. So first I have to check if the array is empty or not. So I can say something like if this, we say that this is that instance of the array, this dot length. So if the array is empty, the value of this dot length should be 0. And you've already seen that 0 is a falsy value. So if this number is not 0, this will be a truthy value. So if this dot length return, so if the array is not empty, return the, so I put here return. So if the array is not empty, return the last index of that array. And if it's empty, I can put here else. So if it is empty, return -1. And that is what this challenge expected us to do. So now if I have an array, let's use this example 1. So if I have an array called nums, so I'll just say const, then I paste that example 1. Then I say nums.last, so this is array, then dot last. I expect this one to return the last index. So let me log this in the console. Then if I run, I expect it to return 3, as it says in that example. So I'll just wait for it in the console first so that you can explain it. And you can see indeed it returned 3. Initially, when you call this last method, there was an error because JavaScript does not have this last method in the array object. But now we have created it here in this code and we have added it in the property. So now if you go and log, you can't log this property here. If you log that property, if you go and write this code in the console, then log the prototype, you can see now you'll be having this last as part of the method that you can use with array. That's why here it did not bring an error. And this is the solution to the challenge. You just added a new property last to the array object. So that is the solution to this challenge. You can just try with you can just say this example 2 to see if it will return 1. So let me just put it as an empty array. Then if I run this code, it should return -1. You can see it returns -1. So yeah, that was the solution to this challenge. See you in the next challenge. Peace out.